The Danish Deception Part 4. Okay, just to recap, we went to Monaco, then we went to Saint-Tropez, and we ended the trip in Cannes. And the very last night we had together, we were at dinner, and I'm walking to go to the bathroom, and I fall, and everything goes black. And let me tell you, I am a clumsy person. I know I'm a clumsy person. I'm always tripping over myself. And that day specifically, I had been tripping over my dress pretty frequently throughout the day. But I've never had like a serious accident before like this. And it was completely out of the blue. I was walking up the stairs, and I remember walking up the stairs, and the stairs in France are extremely narrow. If you've been, then you definitely would probably agree with me. And so I basically came to after falling, hitting my head, and I see these three men above me, and they're wearing like these bright turquoise polos. And I remember that they were the waiters. That was what they were wearing. And I remember just like coming awake and being like, what the fuck is happening? But no one was speaking any English. They're all like screaming in French, freaking out. And so I pass out again, then I come to again, and finally I'm able to say, someone go get my boyfriend. And then I pass out again, then I come to again, and then my ex is sitting next to me. And I see him, and I'm like, what is going on? He's like, I don't know what happened. I think you fell. And I'm like, I don't remember anything. I don't know what happened. And he looked at me, he goes, do you have a history with epilepsy? I'm like, epilepsy? No, I don't have any history with that. I was like, why? He said, because you've been having seizures for the past 10 minutes. And I was like, seizures? I have never, ever had a seizure in my life. So this was shocking news, but I also wasn't like all the way there. So I was just so confused at what was happening. And I remember touching my head, and then I looked at my hand, and there was so much blood. And then I like started looking around, and everything felt wet. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was going to the bathroom. So I look at him and I ask him, I'm like, is this pee? He was like, no, they just like dumped water on you. And I was like, okay. And so they basically told us that because the streets in Cannes are so narrow, they couldn't bring an ambulance. It had to be a fire truck, which I didn't care. I just wanted to get to the hospital. So these firemen come and they get me up, and I stand up, I look down, look at the puddle of water, then I smell my dress. I go, oh my gosh, this is urine. So you're telling me that I've been dating this man for 3 days, and he is now sitting in a pool of my urine and my blood, watching me have seizures. I was just I couldn't believe that this was the reality of what was happening. I get into the truck, and they take us to the hospital, and I'm still freaking out at this point because I literally don't know if I have like a severe brain bleed or what's going on. And they take us into the waiting room, and they're about to take us back. And I remember the nurse said that my ex couldn't go back with me because they still had super strict restrictions from COVID. So he had to wait in the waiting room. And I remember just freaking out because no one is speaking English at this point. And I don't know what to do. I'm so terrified. I feel so alone. And I remember just looking at him, and he could just see the fear in my eyes. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. He's like, just stay calm. I was like, okay. And he ends up leaning into me before they tell him that it's time to go. And he tells me, before you go, I just wanted to tell you that I love you. And I just remember being like, really? Here of all places? He was like, yeah, I wanted to tell you. And I said, I mean, I was so grateful to hear it from him, but also I was like, are you only telling me this because you think I'm about to die? And so a lot of things were going through my head, and I ended up going back, getting a CT scan. They ended up saying, hey, everything's good. You just have a severe concussion, hence why I had seizures. And they're like, you're gonna have to get 4 stitches in your eyebrow. You guys can kind of see the scar. I'm wearing makeup, so you can't really tell. So after I get my stitches, I go back out to the waiting room, and I see my ex, and I automatically just feel this sense of protection and safety because he made me feel so calm, and I was just so grateful to him. And if you watched the Who the Fuck Did I Marry series, I truly believe that this whole experience was the equivalent to Risa Tisa's tire blowout before she met her ex-husband. And God was telling me to run far away from this man. My bad on misinterpreting this message. And I just thought that this was God's way of telling me that this man's gonna keep me safe. And Clearly, that wasn't the case. But we leave the hospital and we go back to the hotel. And obviously I couldn't sleep because I had a severe concussion. So we just stayed up talking all night. And the next day I went to go get all my prescriptions, and then we went to the airport, and it was a really, really tough goodbye because I was just so sad to say goodbye to him. And he had already booked a flight to come visit me in Dallas in 10 days. He booked it before I even went to Monaco because he told me he was so sure of me and of us. And so I knew I was gonna see him in a little bit over a week, but it just wasn't enough. And I just wanted to be with him 24/7. But I said my goodbyes to him, and I was like, you know what? It's gonna be okay. I'm gonna see him soon. Hopped on the plane and went back to Dallas. And it was really difficult to come home for multiple reasons. The biggest reason was that I had to tell my parents that not only did I have this crazy accident, but I also am in love with this man that lives in Denmark. And that's just not a easy conversation to have with the Nigerian parents. And if you know Nigerian parents, or if you have Nigerian parents, you can already assume how this unfolded. Obviously, they support me and they love me and they're wonderful parents, but they were also scared and like, what are you telling me right now? But I dropped the ball, and over time, like, they were so supportive of me and my decisions. I will say the bigger challenge was healing from the head injury because I was just doing crazy ass shit. Like, I remember I got into the shower with my socks on, and then I ran out the door with my bonnet on, chasing Smokey through the streets because I thought he ran away, even though he was inside the house. And to this day, I still think I have lingering effects because I'll add all these filler words, and like what I want to say in my head, I think it, but I can't figure out the words sometimes. And it's very frustrating at times, and you will notice it throughout the series. And it's not something I used to do, but overall, I'm fine. My brain's fine. So obviously we're talking on the phone every single day because, you know, we're in a relationship, and he calls me and he says, hey, I'm considering offering on this apartment complex in Copenhagen. And we had talked about his real estate investments back in the south of France. He had told me that he owned 3 apartments in Copenhagen, 2 of which were rented out, one of which he was occupying as his personal residence. And this apartment complex he was interested in had 34 units, and then there was a top floor that was unfinished, and it could be converted to 10 penthouses. And he said it's fully rented out. It would be such a great investment. The cash flow is great. The only thing is that it's going to take up a lot of my cash liquidity, and also like stocks and crypto and everything. And obviously I'm going to be traveling to the States, and I want to be mindful of like finances. That's why I like want to bring it up to you. So what do you think? And I said, well, at this point, we had been dating for like a couple weeks, so I didn't feel like I was in a place where I could insert my opinion. So I told him, like, whatever you think, I'll support you. And I also didn't know jack shit about real estate investments in Copenhagen. And also, I had just gone to the south of France with him. That whole entire trip, I had spent 15 euros the entire trip. I tried to pay for stuff. He would not take a dime from me. So at this point, I like almost am like searching for a way to prove to him that I'm not with him for his money. So I told him, I go, if I need to, you know, take on some more of like the financial responsibilities in this relationship, I'm more than happy to do so, because this is a partnership and you're there for me when I need you, and I'm going to be there for you when you need me. And he said, you know, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't think it's going to come to that, but thank you for saying that. I said, of course. So he offers on it, and his offer wins apparently by like 1,000 euros. And he decides he's going to move forward with this property maybe a couple days before he came to visit me in Dallas. And I was fully supportive of him buying this property, 100%, because he's a successful businessman. And if he thinks this is a smart move, then I trust him. And also, the money was a whole separate other thing. I didn't care. All I cared about was being with him. So he's coming to Dallas, and I'm getting excited, not just because he's coming to see me, but this is a trip where he's gonna start to meet my people, and it's getting real. And so I remember he was flying into Dallas. It's the middle of September, and I made this sign. It said, "Welcome to Dallas, my Danish man." And I'm waiting outside baggage claim, waiting for him to get through customs. And I'm holding this sign super high, waiting for him to come through. And I will continue the rest in part 5. Danish deception, part 5. Okay, so he comes out of the baggage claim past customs, and I see him, and immediately I'm hit with a realization that I've got it so bad. And if you've never been in love before, falling in love for the first time is like getting swallowed by a current, and you don't even know it's there, and you're good one moment, and then before you realize it, you're in deep, and there's nothing you can do to control it. And that's how I felt. And I knew this man has the power to destroy me, and that was exhilarating but also terrifying at the same time. And I was just really excited to integrate him with my people, and most importantly, I was excited for him to meet Smokey, who is just my world. And watching the way he was with Smokey, they instantly became best friends, and Smokey grew really attached to him. And I mean, I knew I had fallen in love with him, but I realized I hadn't even scratched the surface when I saw him with Smokey. And so we did a lot of things that trip. So we went to a Cowboys game, we went to a retirement party for a partner at my accounting firm, we went to a couple dinners, and then we also just stayed at home. I cooked a lot. I remember I made him red stew and rice, which is my favorite Nigerian food. It's a staple. And I put a lot of habanero peppers, and I remember being nervous, like, can he handle spice? And he ate it and he loved it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this white boy loves spice. This is perfect. And everything just felt like, again, it felt like everything was aligning. And so I wanted to plan something special for him to meet all of my close friends and family. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe we can go meet for a drink. And he said, you know, like, we can go out to eat. I'll pay for everything. I was like, are you sure? He said, absolutely. So I planned a brunch, and we went to brunch here in Dallas, and it was a handful of my really close friends, and my 2 sisters were there, and my cousin and his now wife was there too. So we sit down at brunch, and everyone's like asking him questions, and everyone is just so impressed by him. Again, we're dealing with someone that's very charming, very charismatic. And the thing about my ex is when you meet him, he's so good at asking questions, and he's good at listening. And so it's really easy to get into good conversation with him, and it's really easy to connect with him. And so we had a great brunch. I remember I was like in the bathroom, and my friends followed me, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. Like, we're so happy for you. And I just, I was so grateful to call him mine. And so after brunch, we go grab a drink at a place nearby the restaurant. And at that point, we're all just kind of like chit-chatting, and my cousin and my ex are having a conversation. And this cousin is like a second brother to me. We're very, very close. And I desperately wanted to get the stamp of approval from him. And so obviously they're shooting their shit, and I'm eavesdropping on the conversation 100%. And because I can. And I'm like overhearing them just like, talking about random stuff. And then I hear my cousin ask him, you just have the build of an athlete. Did you play sports? And my ex goes, yeah, I actually played handball. And my cousin goes, isn't that an Olympic sport? And my ex goes, yeah, I actually went to the Olympics twice. And I immediately inserted myself into the conversation. I go, you went to the Olympics? What? And he goes, you know what? I was like the backup of the backup. I didn't even play. I don't like to brag about it because I don't think it's that big of a deal. I was like, well, did you get medals? He was like, yeah, I got a bronze and I got a gold. I was like, well, that's amazing. Like, I'm so impressed. And so now I'm thinking, this man is so humble. So let's add humble to the list of all the reasons why he's such an amazing man. So obviously we had a wonderful trip. He came to Dallas. Again, I did not spend any money while he was here. I obviously paid money for groceries when he wasn't around, but other than that, he wanted to pay for everything. He didn't even want me to pay for ice cream, small things. He was like, I want to treat you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I remember he was leaving to go back to Denmark, and I was so depressed. And if anyone has been in a long distance relationship, you know how difficult it is to say goodbye. And so I was so depressed, and I'm saying goodbye to him at the airport. I'm bawling my eyes out. We finally say goodbye. He goes through security. I go home, and I just am crying for hours. I'm so depressed. And I remember I was supposed to go to a birthday party that night, and I texted my friend. I was like, I literally cannot stop crying, so I can't go to this birthday, and I hate canceling things. And so that's how bad it was. I was actually depressed for literally days. And after he got through security, he was like, I can't even walk to the terminal. I'm so depressed. I just want to walk back out and just come back to you. And I was like, I want that too. And he said, we need to start having the hard conversations on what we want for the future. And I said, absolutely. And so he was like, we need to decide whether or not we're going to live in Denmark or live in Dallas. And I still can't believe this came out of my mouth, but I told him, I said, listen,
I know you already have like a very much established career. And so if you want me to move to Denmark, I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you and like discuss it. And he said, you know, looking at you with your friends and your family this past week has made me realize that I don't want to take that away from you. And you're really close with your parents, they're driving distance away. And like, I live in Copenhagen, my family lives in my hometown in Aalborg, which is hours away. I don't have family in Copenhagen, and I want us to be around family, especially like if we're talking about having kids one day. Like, I want that support, and I want you to be around the people that you love. And so I was so happy, because realistically I did not want to move to Denmark. And so I was so happy that this man is willing to give up everything to be with me. So I was so excited about that. So he was gone for about 3 weeks to a month at this point, and he hadn't booked his flight back to Dallas yet. And then he booked it on like a Thursday, I remember it. So now we're in the middle of October of 2022. He books his flight and he said, okay, I'm coming next week, Wednesday. And I said, okay, perfect. And I'm getting all excited again. And so I called him Friday morning, and keep in mind that there's a time difference. So it's like about 7 hours. So whenever I wake up at like 5 or 6, he's basically halfway through his day. And so I called him that Friday and I said, hey, like, how's your day been? He's like, it's been such a stressful, intense day. I go, what happened? And he's like, I found out that the apartment complex that I bought is dealing with some major foundation issues. Like, it could affect safety of the tenants, and I'm really stressing out and I need to get it fixed. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, did you schedule the repair? He's like, not yet. It's gonna cost like a hefty chunk of change. I was like, how much is it gonna cost? He's like, $50,000. I was like, $50,000? What? Like, that's obviously a lot of money. I'm sure it's a lot of money to a lot of you. It's a lot of money to me. And so I was like, okay, like, what's the plan? He's like, I mean, I have a good portion of it, so I just need to ask my dad for a little bit of a loan. And so I remember being like, I can never in a million years ask my dad for a loan of $50,000. So at this point, I was aware of the fact that like they had this royal title, they had this family trust that like, and like the family had money. I didn't really know like how much or the details behind it. But he told me he was gonna call his dad and ask him for a loan. So a couple hours go by, he calls me and he's really upset. He's like, I talked to my dad on the phone. He will not loan me the money. He says, I've been acting super irresponsible, traveling, doing all these things. And so he just doesn't wanna, he thinks I need to like learn from my actions. And if I'm not prepared for something like this, then there's nothing he can do to help me. And so I felt really bad for him, because he essentially felt like his dad was abandoning him, and I felt really bad for him. And so I said, what's the plan? He's like, I'll figure it out. Like, even if I have to like sell some things, like I'll figure it out. And I was like, okay, well, keep me updated, like whatever you need. And so a couple days go by and he's communicating that he's still stressed out about coming up with this money. And so I said, you know what? Like, I can loan you the money. And so at this point, I had paid off my student loans, paid off my car, bought a house. Like, had a decent savings. I was in a really, really good financial position. And so I wanted to help him, especially because like this man has like treated me so well and done so much for me. And I truly felt like we were in a partnership, especially like when you're talking about the future with someone. And so I told him, like, let me loan it to you. He goes, I would never in a million years borrow money for you. And I was like, it's okay. Like, I don't mind helping. He's like, that's like not even a discussion I want to have. And I said, okay, that's fine. So a couple of days go by and he's still stressing out about coming up with this money. I asked him, like, how much do you need? He's like, it's 10,000 I need. And I was like, again, like, let me loan it to you. He said, no, I'm not taking money from you. And then a couple days go by and he says, okay, like, now I need 6K. And I was like, okay, again, let me give it to you. He's like, no, I still don't want to take money from you. And then basically, like, 2 days before he's supposed to come to Dallas, he tells me, he says, just letting you know, I'm not gonna be able to come to Dallas because I need to figure out this issue. And at this point, I start freaking out because I'm like, no, like, I 100% like want you to come still. Just let me loan you the money so that you'll be fine and we can, you know, be happy and be together. And so after some thinking, he was like, okay, fine, I will borrow the money from you, but you have to promise me that this will be the only time and that you're 100% comfortable with giving me this money. And I said, absolutely, I'm 100% comfortable. And we will continue on in part 6. The Danish deception, part 6. Okay, so I've decided to loan him this money and he's agreed to it. So I download this app. It's called Revolut, and it's kind of like Venmo where you can send money internationally instantly. So I download it. It took like a day to like verify all my information, and I was able to send him the 6K, and the next day he flew into Dallas to come be with me. And so that trip was really fun. We really didn't do a whole lot. I remember we just like went to the state fair and we went to dinner like once, and the rest of the time we just hung out at home. And I remember it was hard for him because he was dealing with some really bad back pains, and I think it was just because he was flying a lot, and he said he injured his back when he was playing handball. So I remember I was giving him like back massages like almost every single day because it was really, really bad. And so this trip was very, very short. He was only there for a week, but I would say this was a very special trip for us because this was like the first time that he actually started making friends, like through me. And I started watching him start to make guy friends. And so this was when I got even more excited because I felt like we were really starting to, build a life here in Dallas together. So he leaves, obviously, again, I'm depressed again. And at this point, I know he's definitely planning on coming to Dallas for Thanksgiving to meet my parents. But I didn't know when he was planning on flying back. And so basically he's gone, and I feel like the second he leaves, like everything just kind of like starts to like fall apart for him. And so for starters, his back pain was getting like much, much worse. He was complaining about it every single day. Like he would text me in the middle of the night being like, it hurts so bad. Like, and I felt terrible because I wanted to help him, but there was nothing I could do because I'm living 5,000 miles away. On top of that, his uncle, who was really sick with cancer, had passed away, and he told me the funeral was gonna be the next week. And I remember telling him, I will fly to Denmark if I need to, if you want me to be there for you. And he's like, no, it's fine. Like I can handle it. It's okay. And so basically that happened. And then I remember I went to Charlotte to go visit one of my girlfriends who had just had a baby. One of my girlfriends that I've been friends with for years and years since college. And so I'm in Charlotte with my friend, and I get a text from him. He's saying, hey, my dad's in the hospital. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And he was like, we still don't understand what happened, but the doctors are running tests. And so later on that day, he told me that he had blood poisoning, and he had like, his infection numbers were like going crazy. And I remember telling him, well, if you're not able to come to Dallas in November, obviously I'll understand, especially like if your dad's in the hospital, like I understand completely. Again, I told him, I'll be there for you if you want me to. He's like, it's okay. Over the course of the next couple days, his dad started to show some more improvement. So he ended up deciding to come to visit me in Dallas. So now we're in November of 2022. So he comes back to Dallas, and basically this was a very exciting trip because number one, I used to be on the board of an organization called UIU. It's a nonprofit that celebrates Igbo Nigerian culture, and my culture is so important to me. And so I was the event coordinator for the Dallas chapter, and I was so proud of this. Like we had just won chapter of the year out of all the chapters in the nation. It was just such a huge accomplishment for me and my whole board. And I remember my cousin, who I told you guys I'm really close with, he was the president. And so we had a huge gala that we planned that year, and we had people flying in from all over the country to come. And obviously it took a lot of planning, and I was working really hard to make sure it was executed perfectly. I remember the day of the gala comes, and he is helping me set up, do everything that entire day. And this was the first time that I fully like integrated him with a bunch of Nigerians. And I was really curious to see how he was gonna react to being with all these people, because obviously Nigerians are so much fun, but some people might think we're a little bit too much. Forget them, but I wanted to make sure that he wasn't one of those people. So we have the gala, he helps me set up all day, and I'm just kind of watching him at the gala, just talking to people, and he's getting along with everyone. He's dancing to the Afro beats, and I just feel like, okay, he really takes my culture seriously. Like he wants to make sure that I know that he's gonna make sure this is a part of his life too. And I remember just being really happy about that. And so after the gala was done, it was a couple days, and my parents came to visit me in Dallas for Thanksgiving. And so I remember he went to go stay at a hotel because my parents, obviously, they're Nigerian, very traditional. We wanted to be respectful. So he went and stayed at a hotel, and my parents came to visit, and he was here when my parents got in town. And I'm telling you, my parents fell in love with him immediately. And I think watching him with my dad it just warmed my heart because they just instantly connected. And my dad, like everyone else, was very fascinated by him. And I remember the following day we went to African market with my parents. It was just me, my ex, and my parents. And he's talking to my parents about the Olympics, and they're asking him all these questions. And he was like, yeah, like the gold medal I gave to my mom, she has it. And then the bronze medal, I actually donated it to charity. And I'm just like, this guy is just so freaking amazing. And so we had an amazing Thanksgiving. It was his first Thanksgiving in the States. And my grandmother had recently just passed away. And this is my dad's mom. It was really, really sad. And he was talking to us about the plans for the burial. And so he said, we're gonna do the burial in May. It's gonna be in the village in Nigeria. And he looks at my dad and he says, I'll be there. And I remember looking at him like, I don't think you really understand what you're agreeing to. And he said, I don't care. I'm gonna be there. I'm like, we're talking about the village in Nigeria. We're not just talking about like a big city where you can get a little bit of culture shock, where you like, you know, or go back to your hotel. And no, we're talking about being in the village. And he said, I don't care, I'm gonna be there. And so that was when I realized like this man really takes my culture seriously. He wants to be there for me. He wants to be there for my family. And that meant so much to me. And so at the end of the trip, I told him, I said, this week has showed me that I know that I want to spend my life with you. And I'm just, thank you for being the man that you are. And he said, I want to spend my life with you. And I'm going to let you know, like, I already know that I want to marry you someday. Like, and I don't want you to ever doubt that. And so he asked me, he's like, I have a question. Like, do you have an idea of what ring you would want? And I was like, I mean, I have some ideas, but I have not thought about it really extensively. And so he said, what are your thoughts on us going ring shopping? And keep in mind, at this point, we've been dating for like 4 months, 3-4 months. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. So we found a jeweler. We went and we tried on some rings. I remember I'm trying on lab grown and natural, and I'm like looking at the price differences, and I'm like, I am not allowing you to buy me a natural stone because that number is just crazy. I'd rather us spend money investing, doing other things. And he said, well, let me look into it because I kind of do want to get you natural. And I was like, no, we're getting a lab grown. And I remember, like, if you've, you know, gone ring shopping, you know, the price difference is like astronomical. And so I remember I picked out a ring that I really liked, and then we left, and that was basically the end of like the rings for that moment. And so he goes back to Denmark, and the plan was for me to go on a trip with him for Christmas. As I mentioned previously, my parents were traveling for Christmas, and him and his older sister do not have a relationship. Like, they can't be in intimate settings together, so they alternate Christmases. Like, he had last Christmas, so this Christmas was her Christmas. So we already had planned to spend Christmas together. And so originally we were talking about going to South Africa, like I mentioned before, and then we started looking at flights, and he was like, it's a long trip, I only want to fly business, and they were like $12,000 round trip. And he's like, well, maybe we can make it work. I was like, we are not spending that much on flights to South Africa, that's not happening. And so I started looking at other flights, and then we talked about maybe going to Brazil, and then he tells me, okay, make an itinerary and look at hotels and flights and everything and send it to me, and I'll book it. We're gonna go to Brazil. I said, okay, sounds good. So I wake up one day, I said, hey, did you book the travel? And he was like, no, I haven't, but there's something I need to talk to you about. I go, what's up? He goes, so I talked to a doctor because my back has gotten really, really bad, and it turns out I have 2 herniated discs, and I'm gonna need to get surgery. And I said, okay, like, that's fine. And he said, I'm gonna have to get surgery December 21st. And I said, oh wow, okay, well, that's fine. We don't need to go on a trip. I'll just come to Denmark and I'll help you recover and everything. And he said, actually, no, I don't want you to come to Denmark. I want you to be there, but I don't want that to be the first time you meet my parents, and they definitely want to be there. And at this point, I'm like, what do you mean? I'm your girlfriend and we're talking about a future. Why would I not be there when you're getting a major surgery? And I will continue on in part 7.